Last impressions are tough to shake, so it's ultra important for any movie to end in a satisfying and impactful way that it doesn't leave audiences feeling like they just wasted 100 minutes of their lives. The third act will make or break any movie, being able to elevate a so-so film into rock-solid territory or firmly derail something that was doing so well up to that point. And the latter is certainly sadly true of the following 10 recent horror movies, each of which were sailing smoothly enough for the first two-thirds, only for the final reel to lose the plot completely. Endings are harder to write than anything else, of course, because having a great idea is just half the battle, and knowing how to pay it off is a whole other matter entirely. These movies all struggle to wrap things up satisfyingly, suffering from wonky plot twists, listless exposition dumps, and a patent lack of ambition compared to everything leading up to that point. The cast and crew clearly tried to make the best of it, but these underwhelming finales did some serious damage to how these movies were perceived overall. I'm Sean Ferrick for What Culture Horror, and here are 10 recent horror movies ruined by their third act. Number 10. The Gorge. Scott Derrickson's The Gorge is pretty entertaining. It's a genre-bending sci-fi action horror romance for its first 80 or so minutes, but comes unstuck when protagonist Levi accidentally falls into the mysterious gorge and Draza heads in to save him. At this point, the film largely ditches the slow burn characterization of the first two acts and devolves into a roller coaster ride of body horror action schlock. This isn't inherently deal-breaking, but the avalanches of exposition was saddled with, and a wildly rushed climax that thoroughly wastes Sigourney Weaver as the villain Bartholomew, ensures this thing sputters to an unremarkable conclusion. After Derrickson invests the audience so much in these two characters and the strange world they inhabit, The Gorge backslides into something far more conventional, even forgettable, for the final stretch. For anyone who saw the film's trailer and thought it seemed to be a bit too YA adjacent for its own good, that unfortunately proves itself true just when it matters most. Number 9. Heretic. Heretic is a prime example of a movie with a brilliant concept that struggles when it has to start answering questions and resolving its central enigma. Hugh Grant gives a masterful Golden Globe nominated performance as the villainous Mr. Reed, who seals two young Mormon missionaries inside his home while putting them through a twisted series of trials intended to test their faith. Filmmakers Scott Beck and Brian Woods milked the scenario for every last drop of suspense, all while giving Grant a wealth of delicious dialogue to chew through. It's so good, however, that the eventual explanation for everything feels rather deflating and not particularly clever by comparison. It's hardly a shock that Reed has been fabricating the seemingly supernatural events occurring, and his revelation that the world's one true religion is control doesn't exactly land with the food for thought impact the filmmakers seemingly thought it would. Grant, Thatcher and East still do fine work regardless, but in the back end, Heretic largely abandons its more erudite beginnings for something more formulaic and familiar. Number 8. Heart Eyes. Nothing hurts a slasher movie's third act more than predictability, and after an entertaining opening hour, the romantic slasher comedy Heart Eyes falls apart during its easily telegraphed final reel. Despite the second act concluding with the death of the Heart Eyes killer, anyone paying attention knows that we're dealing with a fake-out situation, and heroes Ali and Jay aren't out of the woods yet. After all, it's blindingly obvious that Detective Shaw is one of the killers from the moment that she randomly vanishes following an encounter with Heart Eyes, only to resurface with nothing more than her arm in a sling. Shaw's highly suspicious off-screen scrap with Heart Eyes made her immediately sus, and it wasn't exactly a huge leap to predict that her accomplice might be the random creepy IT tech David, introduced moments before she fought Heart Eyes. Honestly, it would have been way more interesting if the killer was indeed some random dude we hadn't met in the beginning, as the original fake-out suggested, in turn allowing the third act to ping unexpectedly back into rom-com territory. Number 7. Terrifier 3. For all of its boundary-pushing gore, Terrifier 2 received its fair share of criticism for its undisciplined 138-minute runtime, and especially a bloated third act that just kept going. But for the recent third film, director Damien Leone seemingly overcorrected, for while Terrifier 3 hews much closer to 2 hours than its predecessor, it also serves up one hell of a chaotic, rushed-to-the-death finale. The build-up to the final showdown between Sienna and Art the Clown is way too frantic, and it's all over far too quickly, leaving fans to speculate that Leone ripped a wealth of material out of the third act to bring the runtime down. This is without even getting into the lousy off-screen death of Sienna's brother, Jonathan, which is almost certainly an extremely unconvincing fake-out, because why would we not be shown a major character's death? The wonky third act didn't stop Terrifier 3 from being a phenomenal box office success, though hopefully in the upcoming fourth and allegedly last Terrifier movie, Leone can finally deliver a third act that isn't either too long or too rushed. Number 6. Apartment 7A. There weren't exactly many fans of Rosemary's Baby clamouring for a prequel, and yet director Natalie Erica James's taut direction and Julia Garner's solid central performance made Apartment 7A a mostly decent time. Mostly. But the final half hour takes a serious downturn from the ominous vibes established up to that point, with an awkwardly placed exposition dump from a nun ahead of a finale that lifts a little too liberally from the original film from its own good. Where does the line between homage and lazy cribbing lie exactly? It's for fans to decide for themselves, but when the finale is such a pallid imitation of its inspiration, it's tough not to wonder why you're not just watching that film instead. And then there's Apartment 7A's final moments, which do the most obvious prequel thing imaginable by segueing directly into Rosemary's Baby with a brief cameo by original protagonists Rosemary and Guy Woodhouse. Despite the clear talent behind this movie, it failed to do much new or interesting with the original's template and settled for being a conventional, to a fault, horror prequel. Number 5. The Monkey. Between Longlegs and the Monkey's lackluster endings, it seems like filmmaker Oz Perkins struggles a little with third acts. In the case of his latest project, the gleefully unhinged fun of the first two reels, largely defined by an outlandish Final Destination-esque death sequences caused by the titular diabolical object, gives way to an underwhelming messy finale. In a third act twist surprisingly similar to that of Longlegs, we learn that Hal's estranged twin brother, Bill, has been behind the recent spate of brutal deaths, using the monkey in the hope that it would kill Hal, in revenge for Hal accidentally killing their mother with the monkey in childhood. But instead, the monkey kills random folk around town, and when Bill tries to force the monkey to drum once more, it instead unleashes a torrent of destruction upon the town, including a plane crash, leaving countless dead in its wake. Bill is then killed by an errant bowling ball, which Hal accepts his position as the guardian of the monkey to prevent its death-inducing key from ever being turned again, just as he and his son Petey encounter the Pale Horseman, because why the hell not? After two carefully controlled acts, the monkey's final third feels like a scattered series of Mad Libs riffs that don't really fully cohere together, nor do they give the movie much of a satisfying ending at all. Number 4. Speak No Evil 2024. Last year's English language remake of 2022's Danish-Dutch horror hit Speak No Evil did the most predictably cynical, extremely Hollywood thing imaginable. The moment that the James McAvoy starring remake was announced, many fans assumed that this new take would ditch the original's bleak ending, in which the serial killer antagonists murder their victims and get away with it. And that's precisely what happens, as Speak No Evil 2024 substantially changes the third act, instead staged here as a more action-packed and intense showdown between killers Paddy and Kira and their intended victims Louise and Ben. This time around, the heroes win, and to give the film a crowd-pleasing cherry on top, Paddy is beaten to death with a brick by Ant, a boy who Paddy and Kira have kept hostage since killing his family. Though filmmaker James Watkins certainly shoots the action well and the performances from the cast are beyond reproach, the remake's decision to abandon its predecessor's bleaker, more provocative ending concedes just how little belief Hollywood has in the capacity for mainstream audiences to accept challenging material, according to writer Jack Pooley. Number 3. Lisa Frankenstein. Zelda Williams' Lisa Frankenstein is a pretty fun horror comedy for the most part. That is until it comes time to figure out how to wrap this oddball undead romance up. Teen goth Lisa falls in love with a newly reanimated Victorian-era man, but when he leaves a number of dead bodies in his wake, the pair finds the net closing in on them. And so, what's a girl to do but join her beloved creature in death by fatally electrocuting herself in a tanning bed, of course. Lisa perishes, and the final scenes show the creature reading poetry to a resurrected, bandaged Lisa, the pair implied to live on as undead lovers forevermore. But Williams shoves all of this incident into the final 10 minutes of the movie, and it feels massively rushed, as though the studio ordered the sequence to be cut down for time. It feels like a few scenes worth of character motivation were left on the cutting room floor here, ensuring Lisa Frankenstein trips over itself at its most pivotal moment. Number 2. Wolfman. Lee Whannell's Wolfman is one of the most disappointing horror films of the past year because of the potential for a much more grounded take on the classic Universal monster speaks for itself. Now, in fairness, Wolfman isn't a great film even at the best of times. It certainly has its moments, largely due to the efforts of leads Christopher Abbott and Julia Garner, but in its bones smacks of a film held back by its tight budget rather than benefiting from it. Yet it's the third act where the wheels truly come off. Blake's final form as the Wolfman is more silly than scary, and the refusal to commit to a full-on hairy werewolf design left many fans hugely disappointed. Then there's the fact that the majority of the third act is so dimly lit it's tough to make out what the hell's going on, especially during the overlong barn sequence, in turn robbing Blake's inevitable demise of much of its potential emotional resonance. Number 1. The Platform 2. For the bulk of its runtime, The Platform 2 basically offered up more of what people enjoyed about the first film, as in desperate people squabbling over resources and killing one another within a heightened dystopian sci-fi horror setup. but most of the negative sentiment surrounding the sequel, which in fact is really a prequel, can be pointed directly at its sheer car crash of a third act. Beyond the fact that it borrows a little too generously from the climax of its predecessor, the Platform 2's finale also marks an overzealous attempt to expand the series' mythology. The ending offers up some wild left-field reveals, namely the presence of children at the bottom of the facility, which are ultimately more confusing than tantalizing, and seemingly confirm that the world of these movies was probably better off left vague and ambiguous. Needless to say, if a third platform movie does indeed happen, a back-to-basics approach would probably be for the best.